Welcome back to Making Records with Eric Valentine. That's me. This is a very special edition of Meet with the Masters because the master, in this case, is a dear friend and Barefoot alumni named Cian Riordan. I was fortunate enough to have him work with me at Barefoot for almost 10 years. And then around 2015, he ventured out on his own and has done amazing things like won Grammys and worked with amazing artists like St. Vincent and Lana Del Rey and Jane's Addiction and Foxygen and Slater-Kinney and on, like a bunch of really, really cool stuff. I was able to catch up with him at the studio he built at his home in Southern California called Pepper Tree Studio, and we talked about the studio, building the studio, his mixing setup, mixing techniques, and his really incredible journey from being an assistant at Barefoot to then being a Grammy-award-winning mixer engineer in the industry. It was a really incredible conversation. And one of the things that I was reminded of when we got to talk was that he is just a funny motherfucker, man. Like, we had the best time working together at Barefoot, and that was always important to me. My number one goal was always to try and make extraordinary recordings and incredible music. I'd try my best to do that. But number two was to enjoy the process. And we really had a great time. We were just hanging out, trying to make cool recordings, just laughing our asses off the whole time because he's just a crack up. And it was really, really great to enjoy that part of hanging out with him again. You get to really hear me kind of lose my shit, like big, uncontrollable belly laughs. He really got me a couple times in this conversation. It was super fun. Okay, so here we go. This is my good friend, the extraordinary engineer mixer, Cian Riordan. All right, I am here with Mr. Cian Riordan. There he is. And so I've gotten an opportunity to come over here and check out this setup. And so how long have you been in this location?
We're going on year 5.
5 years here. Okay.
Yeah.
So this is
2020. It was a COVID build.
a COVID. Perfect. Yeah. A lot of people build home studios during COVID.
Exactly.
Yours is just very nice.
Yeah.
So you're well settled in this spot.
Yeah.
For sure. And so I just wanted to go around and just kind of check out what you got in here because it's a cool combination of some nice outboard gear. Obviously, you work on Pro Tools,
Mm-hmm.
and somehow all that gets integrated together, some version of hybrid stuff. And
Sure.
I'm always curious about that, like how people manage to marry all this crazy shit together.
Mm-hmm.
So let's just start with your speakers, because this is something we just got done listening to the speakers, which sound incredible in here. And so what are these? These are PMCs?
These are the PMC 6.2s.
Okay. And you started working on these when?
I got them, I want to say maybe a year and a half, 2 years ago. I had moved, a long time worked on NS10s.
Okay.
Because of you. Thanks.
I deeply apologize for that. Sorry.
And it was funny when I was kind of like trying to get into hi-fi land, for whatever reason, the ATC 25s just spoke.
Yeah, I remember when you switched to those.
Yeah.
Yeah, we had talked about that a little bit. You were definitely enjoying those for a period of time.
A couple of years, they were good. And then I built this room. So this is at my house. This is a one car garage. I admit when I went into building this, it happened very quickly. It was kind of in haste.
Yeah.
I was going through some mental health issues at my old studio and I needed to get here. So I hired a contractor, never built a studio before, and we got to work.
Yeah. So you physically helped build this place.
Yeah. So like nice. I took a couple months off. I had grown-ups, doing real stuff with seismic.
You had some adults involved.
Exactly. But yeah, I kind of went in very fast and then had some panic attacks along the way, had some bad dreams, had the sense to bring in a couple of acousticians to just help figure out the low end. And just have a gut check along the way because it was just moving so fast.
Right.
And my worst fear was like spending all of this money and coming in and just having it sound terrible.
That magic moment, the first time you turn up the speakers in your room and you go like, oh no.
Yeah.
That happened to me at Barefoot. Yeah. And then and you got to see the insanity that, ensued for decades
Yeah, a
after
couple
that.
iterations of
Yeah.
like, well, this is what we're doing this week.
Yeah. We're going to tear apart the control room again.
It's like,
Yeah.
can we just make records?
Yeah, no, there's no recording happening this week. We're gonna try whatever, putting tubes everywhere.
Yeah. So I had some good friends help with the low end stuff, and that, initially I had the ATCs in here paired with some subs, and it sounded amazing. And then recently moved to these guys, and I've been super happy with them. Stuff has been translating really good. And
so, because this is a small space.
Yeah, it's tiny.
So what's the footprint?
It's 16 by just shy of 12.
Yeah, that's not a lot of volume to work with. So what is the treatment on the walls? Because I see the covering for it.
Yeah, so we basically did like a soundproof shell. So it's got 2 layers of drywall with green glue and all that stuff. So
yeah,
it tightened everything up, and then we did an internal structure. And so for most of where you see fabric, there's just either 1 or 2 layers of rock wool, just safe and sound.
Right. Okay.
And then in each of the 2 corners, there's 2 membranes up here, and then there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 membranes behind the back wall.
Okay, and so these are membrane style absorbers, or like lip mass
membranes.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. So that I'm curious about, because I experimented with that. I think we texted about this. I tried that in my control room in Vermont. It was a total failure for me. Didn't work at all. No working. And so obviously it worked for you. Now, do you have any details about like before and after and what the difference was? Was it really measurable? Or
well, before I got my friends involved, it was just a shell. So like I basically came in and shot out all the room, and they were looking for particular hot spots. So I was shooting kind of all the corners, all sides of the room, and
by shooting, like doing fuzz measure, doing a sweep, and seeing what the response was in the corners.
Like putting a mic here, putting a mic here, and just trying to get a sense of how the low end is building up in the room.
Yeah.
And so I sent it to them, and then they basically spec'd out, because initially I was just going to do a frame with just rock wool. That was my initial plan.
Yeah.
And they were like, this will get you so far. Like you'll have great imaging, you'll be good down to like maybe 200 hertz.
Yeah.
But below that, like, you're cooked.
Yeah.
And so they prescribed it. And at the time, I was a tube trap guy. Like I just didn't know what the fuck a limp mass membrane was.
Yeah. And not many people do.
Yeah. And so they prescribed it, and I
you don't learn about those until you have to.
Exactly. It's like an STD.
Yeah.
But I think I was like, up until the minute that they were built, because again, I had these people that, I had my contractors who had never built anything like this. So we're like following these plans. Yeah. And it's kind of a bizarre thing to build. You have a sealed structure, and you have a layer of fiberglass, and you have this like crazy mass loaded vinyl that you have to like get airtight. It's a whole pain in the ass.
Yeah. And
the whole time I'm just like, fuck, like, I hope, like, I really went in blind, and I really, at this point, I had needed to kind of outsource that, because I was just kind of like, I was up my own ass and in my head on everything. Yeah. And I just never forget, like, before we put up the fabric, we had all the panels, we had all the fiberglass. I had built those little 703 panels up there, and I just remember the first time listening in here, and it was just emotional, just hearing a room and hearing the low end contained, and I hadn't even like tuned the speakers or any of that stuff. This was just throwing them up, and it was just such a relief. It was just like... And so they came, they made some tweaks in terms of like where to put what, and also they were big on kind of where positioning the speakers. That's a big thing. And at the time I had the HC25s with these giant rhythmic 15-inch subwoofers, and so marrying those was a huge pain in the ass.
Yeah, it's complicated.
Yeah, my friend Rory, who's a whiz, now an incredible mastering engineer, he spent the best part of like 8 or 9 hours in here just trying to get, like, we were turning the subs all different directions, and they had these shitty servos on them with like some very half-ass crossovers. Yeah. And he got it to sound pretty incredible. Yeah. And I think, as we were talking about earlier, when I moved to this setup, which is no subwoofers, what a jump in just coherency throughout the frequency band. Like
Yeah.
it just sounds like it's coming from one place. You're not feeling low end. I mean, you know what I'm talking about.
I've made that same transition. For a long time, I was messing around with subs with NS10s or with the Uris, which really, as big as they were, they just weren't designed to reach down as low as
Yeah.
we need to hear things now. And it just never really quite works. There's this weird sort of detached,
Yeah.
sensation to those sub frequencies, and it never really feels particularly, cohesive or congealed, and it's just not focused and punchy in a way that is
Yeah.
that informative. When you're trying to mix, there's lots of low energy in the room, but it's hard to sort of pinpoint it. So, I mean, I think in this space, certainly the limp mass, if you get them to work, it makes more sense to me because of the limited square footage.
Yeah, I mean, the thought of like, if you do two traps, obviously that's a big volume.
No room for you.
I mean, you could stuff them up in the ceiling. Like,
Yeah.
I have 16-foot ceilings, which works in my favor.
Yeah, that's
sure.
one thing that's, I think, is a huge benefit in here for sure. Is
But
this
yeah,
the high
the
ceiling?
alternative would be like, just like big soffits, like big, like just depth of rock wool.
Yeah,
Yeah. That's what you did at your Topanga studio, right? Because you didn't do any sort of
that's right.
fancy low end stuff.
There was no fancy low end stuff because my theory is that I stacked up enough rock wool. Hi, Elsa. You're not invited to this particular interview. We're doing your interview next.
Yeah.
So that it's almost 2 feet deep of rock wool, which got me pretty far down with the absorption, and then the walls were so thin that the rest of it just kind of passed right through and didn't get reflected back into the room, so I didn't really have to deal with it. But
I actually have I have pictures here of the build, and I can send these to you so you can kind of see.
Okay, yeah, that would be cool
So
to
you
check
can
out.
see here we are building. So you can kind of see this is how it looked,
Uh-huh.
when we had just kind of did the drywall
Yeah.
and did this internal frame.
Yeah, so the soundproofed walls were done at that point.
Exactly. And then
And-
these are the membranes.
Oh, look at that.
And so here they all are. And the layout is
Those look very much like the ones I built.
so the layout is this. So this is the back wall.
Mm-hmm.
And you can kind of see this internal frame here.
Yeah.
And so these are the frequency targets.
Wow.
So
Yeah.
there's this big motherfucker here. This is
Yeah.
4 foot by 8 foot by, probably a foot and a half deep.
Mm.
That's targeting this. This is just like a giant mode in here.
Yeah.
And so that's doing good work down there.
Yep.
And then you got these guys, and then up in the front, in the corners, there's 4 targeting 87 hertz.
Yeah.
And then, these are basically the designs that they gave me.
Yeah.
So once they all went in, then you can kind of see, let's see, that's the big boy there.
Yeah. Cool.
And so then we started stuffing it in. Now they live in the room. There's no back seas on these.
Yeah.
And it's funny,
No undo
you'll
button.
appreciate this plywood was recommissioned from the Great Wall at Barefoot.
Yeah. There's one of the many times that I lost my mind at Barefoot. I just got tired of the sound room, so I decided to just divide it in half. Just why just have one boring room that you've had for a long time when you can have 2 new rooms?
It did sound great.
Yeah.
It
was
looked
fun.
like a thing, but it sounded great.
Yeah, it was definitely.
But I remember
like
you
a
were
hazard.
giving away a bunch of shit, or I forget where you were in your leaving Barefoot journey.
Yeah.
But there was a pile of. I was like, I'll take some.
Yeah. Well, it looks a lot happier here.
Yeah.
Okay. So, well, I'm happy to hear that it worked here. I had high hopes for it in my place, but boy, it did not work for me. But I got where I needed to go, and I had a little more room to play with. So
So did you end up pulling them out?
yeah,
Oh,
I
okay.
took 'em out.
All right.
Yeah. Yep. But okay. So So that's the room.
Mm-hmm.
And now I see some familiar
Yeah, we got some stuff.
familiar pieces here. So the old chorus echo.
Mm-hmm.
And what's your first use for this? Like, what do you usually use that on?
It's either vocal slap or snare slap.
Yeah.
It's kind of the move.
Yeah.
Learn
Vocal
the
and
snare trap from you.
Uh-huh.
But it's also, so when I built this place, I'm obviously limited footprint, and so I was like, I don't want anything in here that's like something I can do with the computer. Like, I don't want anything just to have it for looks.
Right.
Like, I'm just so limited on space that if something lives here, it has to exist here for a reason.
Yeah.
And I wanted like just a tape slap, and I think this tape delay, out of all the tape delays I've ever used, is just, I can get what I want the fastest. Like, it's just so flexible. It has a great spring tank. The sound on sound is very usable. It can be clean, it can be dirty. Like, it's just, when I do a tape slap,
it's a good box. I still keep them around in my world, and the combination of the delay and the reverb has always been super magical.
Yeah, and a lot of times, I'm just using the reverb on it.
Yeah,
and the same, it's like the H3000. I have the RMX 16 over here.
Yeah,
the last St. Vincent record was a big kind of jump into like very stylized 80s ambiances.
Right.
And there's just something about, I have the plug-in version of both of these. And I just can't make them sound like the hardware.
Yeah. And so is that a reissue of it, or
that's an original? Yeah.
Oh, it's an original of.
Yeah.
Yeah, because
RMX 16. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Because I've heard that those things, if they go wrong, it can be a real problem. But yeah, I'm still happy.
Yeah. But yeah, the H3000, like, same. It's just got a thing that, the micro pitch, some of those like reverse reverbs they're just like instant, like,
yeah.
Okay, here's some vibe.
Yeah, I definitely still have my bigness patch.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Yeah. And so then this thing,
yes,
I haven't seen one of these for a long time.
It's stuck around, man. It's like I can't get away from it.
Yeah. I mean, I got to say, I still miss that thing. Even, there's something about the way it displays the low end that is way more informative than the spectrum analyzer and Pro Q or any of that.
It's the speed of it. There's something about, it's not super, like all of these spectrum analyzers, and this has one as well. But I don't, like, it's happened so fast. It's just like you can't even read the information, where there's something about, even on the fastest response time on this, it just hangs out long enough to where you can kind of see what's happening.
Yeah.
And that paired with like just having stared at this thing for 15 years now.
Yeah.
Like, I can just, like, I can hear things pretty good, but I can just look real quick and be like, is the fundamental of the kick and the fundamental of the snare in the same zone? Like,
right.
Great. I'm doing my job. Like, I can move on.
Yeah.
It's quick tools.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, one of those things, lived on the meter bridge of my console since the early 90s, for a long time. And I'm impressed that you actually have one that's working reliably.
I have two in the basement. one I had to pull the screen from, but I think I have one working one if you want it.
Oh my God. I would definitely, I miss that thing. I do. There's definitely been times, somewhat recently where it's like, man, I wish I could just look at that thing. I'd know what's going on,
Yeah, it's super cool.
Yeah. Okay, so you have a 500 series rack, some 560s.
Yeah.
Those are always great. I love the high end on those.
Yeah, it's nice. I have these things are awesome. These like little radial reamp boxes. So basically it just turns any guitar effects chain into an insert in Pro Tools.
Oh, yeah, cool.
So sends and receives. It's just very quick. Like, I can just throw it as an insert on Pro Tools and it's there.
Yeah.
This I use quite often, so I just literally installed it as like one device. Definitely like a Chad Blake trick there.
Yeah, for sure. That is a tried and true for
sure. Does a thing on drums that can be cool.
Yeah.
Some OG EQ.
Oh yeah, this is from the first 100 that we made. It's got that sintered metal.
11 and 12, I think, are the numbers.
Wow, nice.
That's a newer one.
Yeah, and so I seem to remember you saying at one point that did these do you use these EQs on your whole mix at times?
So for probably the first 2 or 3 years here, I was kind of always averse to having a mix bus, or at least having, because you'd always hear about these guys, and it's just like they just have this thing that every mix goes through, and I was like, well, how do you know if it should,
Yeah.
But I thought about it, and I basically came into having these as well as this original Unfairchild here, the old 6BC8 version.
Yeah.
So I would have that live on the mix bus from the start of the mix, and this thing would be set extremely conservatively. Like maybe on the most aggressive mix, you might get half a dB or a dB.
Yeah.
It's really just a tone box.
Right. Yeah.
And then paired with this, really just doing this very gradual, slow, high-end shelf. I really enjoyed, one, having that high end just kind of baked in from the beginning, because it just saved me so many moves upstream, because I don't have a full console of these, so I can't be, I mean, additive high end, I think, is still the one thing that software EQs just don't do as well as hardware. Like everything else, like cutting, low end boost, I can do all that shit in the computer, but like adding high end, that's where the ball game is.
Yeah. I've heard a lot of people repeat that sentiment. I think everybody is still feeling that for whatever reason, boosting high end,
or at least aggressively
works better with hardware.
So I had it for a long time, and honestly, it wasn't until you made your stupid plugin was I like, okay, let's audition this thing. And there was another plugin, a company called what are they called, Make Believe, and they made a plugin version of the Soundtech, the mastering EQ.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And I basically, at this point, I was shooting the curves, and this has a pretty insane curve, whether it was designed that way or not. But it had one.
It's not flat. I know that much.
But
same as the Fairchild. That thing's not flat either.
Yeah, but it had a thing, and so I was able to recreate the harmonic, the THD from this. I was able to measure that and recreate that in the plugin, and as well do the Soundtech with the high-end boost. And I did as many A/B tests as I could, and it was so like unclear that I'm just gonna go in the box, because at this point, having these things stay static, which is what I did, because I wasn't changing them for the mix. Because I would be working on one song for 3 hours, I would need to jump onto another project, so it really needed to stay. And you can even see the markings here, like that's where these lived, and just the flexibility of having it in the box.
The workflow is undeniable.
It's undeniable. And sonically, I was working on a record that turned out really great, but I kind of switched halfway, and so I had the ability to kind of really A/B it, like where the first half of the record I'd mix with the hardware mix bus, the second half of the record I'd mix in the box, and then I was able to go through and beat the first half of the record with the in the box, just because I was able to actually massage the moves, where this doesn't need the fucking 6 dB boost here. I can back that off a little bit, and just having that flexibility inevitably served the project better. So that's where I'm at nowadays. These just get fired up for, if I do need to kind of throw a huge amount of high end on something, I'll come out for it. If I'm tracking a vocal in here, it's nice to just have an EQ handy. But they're getting a lot less use than they used to.
And so all this outboard stuff, there's a bunch of cool tube stuff. You mentioned the original Unfairchild, but you've got these cool,
Yeah, so these are Highland Dynamics.
This price,
Basically, it's an RCA BA6A, RS124 front end with a BA6A back end. So it's kind of this cool hybrid compressor. It's just a fucking heavy fucking tone box.
Yeah, it's a lot of color.
Compressor. It's hard to make stuff sound good. Like if it needs compression, that does the thing.
Right.
And it's great. And it's, again, one of the few things that like I can't find that in the box. Like I can't get that level of compression, that level of distortion. So yeah, these things stick around just because they're, there's so many people doing what we're doing now, and everybody's really good, that it's like those 1 or 2% that just gets you there a little quicker.
Or that has its own distinct personality that isn't a patch in a plugin that somebody else can't just pull up. And so all of this stuff gets incorporated with just hardware inserts?
Yeah, that's it. So
Okay.
basically I have this Orion. So it's got 32 IOs.
Yep.
And then the patch bay setup where every piece of hardware in here has its own IO.
Oh, perfect.
And so
yeah.
it literally just bring it up in Pro Tools and
Right. And so you have your inserts named as the piece of equipment that it is? Yeah, that's sweet.
yeah, it's very useful. It's just fast, and it kind of like, you know, because if I have to go through the trouble of doing it, then I'm just like, I got to move on.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
But if it's that quick and I can just quickly AV it and be like, yes, this is worth pursuing, then I'll go down that road.
Yeah. And so then the Lynx IO, the Lynx that's what you actually listen to, or?
No, so right now the Grace is my DAC, so this monitor controller. So the output of the Orion is going in digitally to this, and then this is doing the conversion. I'm just using this Orion for outboard
I see.
send and receive, and then this is additional IO that I got just for this. So when I need to kind of feed this, I ran out of input, so I just got that.
Okay. Tell me about this thing.
This belongs.
cool.
This is actually this is on a long-term rental from my friend Zach.
Okay.
And it's an old 54 series little broadcast console.
Neve?
It's a little Neve, little baby Neve.
Uh-huh.
I fell in love with this console because my friend Annie, also known as St. Vincent, when we were doing her last record, we were using this old Op Amps Lab console. That was a really cool sound, and the previous record was this like very kind of 70s styled thing, and it served us really well for that. But for the new material, it was clear that we just needed something with just more fidelity, more robust high end and low end, more flexible routing. And so we were able to source an old 54 series. It was an 18 channel with 16 buses from Decca Studios
Oh, cool.
in the UK.
Yeah.
And it was part of this cool remote rig that they had for recording orchestras. And so she got it for a song. We luckily she's the same manager as the Foo Fighters. Went on the Foo Fighters shipping container back from a tour.
That's convenient.
Yeah. And we made the last record, All Born Screaming, almost entirely on that console. And, you know, people like to shit on these Neves because they have chips. They're not, you know, fully Class A and, you know, whatever. But I think they sound amazing. And these don't have the preamps, but the one that she does, those preamps just have tons of gain. And they're so clean.
Yeah.
And I love the limited EQ.
Uh-huh.
Like, I just love, again, just to be able to add in high end like that. You can massage it in the computer, but just getting that like dusting of high end.
Yeah, that broad brush, like, I want this brighter. Yeah, cool.
So I really like it. And so my friend Zach had one of these. He needed a place to put it. So I incorporated it into the studio. And I basically just use it I don't use it for stems. I don't have like a stem workflow.
Oh, Zach, you don't have any place to put your Neve. I mean, I guess I'll let you put it here. I mean, it's going to be in the way, but, you know.
Shout out Zach Dawes.
Yeah.
But now it's really useful for, like, if a mix comes in and let's say there's like a string section or something, and I don't want to deal with, you know, all of the mics. It's so much more musical to just like, okay, switch on that converter. Let's get a blend here. Then I can start, you know, processing it through here. I can start sending it to some stuff, and then like I'm taking in a stereo sound and getting on with my life.
Yeah, and so you do like a premix on this thing, and then you capture it in, and that's it.
And that's it.
Yeah. So that's typically how you use this. You don't typically use this as a live processing thing. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. I experimented with it, and again, just like needing the flexibility to jump around on projects. Like any given week, I'll be mixing for 2 or 3 different artists, and revisions will come in on one song while I'm trying to finish another thing, and it's just like, unfortunately, my workflow can't have that, you know, unless I was really on it with calibrating it and just having it stay static, but that would not be a lot of fun, I think.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, it gets used every now and then. I will say, as the plugins get better and better, like this stuff is getting used less and less. You know,
I think
the reality, and I always want to be honest with myself about it too. Like, you know, there's certainly a benefit of getting out of the chair and kind of recalibrating your brain away from the screen, but you know, the plugins are just getting better and better.
I know. I always try and just promise myself to be honest about it, and just like, if it sounds good, it sounds good, and I'm just, I don't want to worry about like what's responsible for it, you know?
Yeah.
Like, just trust your ears, and if it sounds good, it's okay.
Yeah.
You know?
Being comfortable in that.
Yeah. So do you have like a recent discovery, whether it's a piece of hardware, a plug-in, a technique, a thing that you discovered recently that's like, oh man, I love this new thing. What's your favorite new, you know?
I don't know if I'm reinventing the wheel on anything. I mean, I would say these things keep getting their uses.
These are Scully Crees.
I think you gave these to me.
Okay, awesome.
You had a pile of them that you were just like, get these out of the studio.
Yeah.
Cool. And there was some cool moments on the St. Vincent record where I was kind of pushing the limit of what kinds of distortion I could get in the computer.
Sure, yeah.
And you know, we were just like, some of these songs were just like, we're upping the ante, and we needed like everything to just get bigger and louder and bigger and louder. And there were some moments where these were just magic for just completely exploding a signal.
Yeah.
But doing it in a way, whereas if I did it in the computer, you lose all the high end, or it just, you know, it just doesn't sound the same.
It doesn't open up in the same way.
Yeah, and these things, and I know that there's a plug-in version of it now that I'm starting to kind of put through its paces, but the combination of this with exploding the input of, like, because there's no gain staging. I mean,
right.
It's all distortion.
Yeah.
But it's a very satisfying high end. That and it just gets wide, and also because I accidentally wired one of these out of phase, so it's also like you send a stereo source to it, it's very
it's a stereo wider too.
Yeah.
Look at that.
So I use that a lot, and again, it's just like these fun moments where I can just try it and again just dime it, and it's just something that like most people can't do. And you don't hear it on records, and that's exciting to me. When you hear something, it's like, I don't hear that on anything.
Yeah. That's cool. Because those things are potentially, I mean, I guess everything's sort of getting expensive now, but they're not like insanely expensive. You can come across some of that stuff. Yeah.
And the poor tape machines are getting cannibalized for them now, because I think they've come into favor as a mic pre. But
yeah, and so you go into the mic pre input so you can really floor it. Yeah. And so then, but the level that's coming out is going to be insanely hot.
So sometimes I'll use the mic pre, sometimes I'll go back and just switch it to the line. But yeah, it's hot, and so there is a combination of also clipping the input.
So you're just letting it clip the thing.
Sometimes I will go into something else to kind of throttle it back. I've used the MPEQs. These things can be really cool. This can be really cool. You're obviously you're adding another tonal element there.
Sure.
It's pretty heavy-handed. But I mean, the sound of clipping converters is also just fucking fun and exciting.
Yeah. Why not? Yeah. I mean, when I do stuff like that, I just throw a passive pad on the output, you know, and so if you want, you can just hear whatever the analog device is doing.
Yeah.
Just hear that part of it.
That's big brain shit, Eric.
I'll send you the spreadsheet I made for calculating pads. Okay, so we got a sense of what the setup is. I have a few other things I'm really curious about.
Sure.
You know, with your mixing, I had a chance to sort of get myself caught up with more of the recent stuff that you've done. It was really fun. I got to do a bunch of listening, and so I want to switch things around so I don't have to hold a camera.
Okay.
Actually, just have a conversation. Okay. Now I don't have to hold a camera. So, you know, I was just saying I had a chance to listen to some of your more recent stuff. I got to update myself on the stuff that you've been working on, because, you know, I've been able to, you know, check in at times and listen to what you're doing. And Key and I worked together for a long time at Barefoot, and so I got to work on stuff and hear stuff that you were doing. You mix stuff for me at times, which I have to say could be the greatest achievement. I have very, very difficult to mix for. I've really bummed some people. Been really bummed some people out with that. So there's one particular person I don't know that will ever be able to speak again. Just sad. But you actually managed to do that in a way where I was like, okay, this is great, you know, like, and I think it was the Wombats one where I was really like,
yeah, that's right.
yeah, this is better than, you know.
Well,
I
it was
think.
I think at that point we were still in full console land.
That's right.
And I
yeah.
remember we'd record it. It was like a one-off or something.
Yeah.
And you know, naturally, you just
I
went
think this
straight into
was the
mixing.
song "Your Body's a Weapon."
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I remember, I remember the mix you did was great, but it was a console mix, and
That's
I think
right. Yeah.
the A&R at the time was just not feeling it. And I remember
Mm-hmm.
you were a little pissed. You were just like what the fuck, like you know. For people that don't know, an Eric Valentine mix is not like a 3-hour let's dance around the mix bus. It's like it's a couple days. It's a labor of love.
It's a deep dive.
Yeah, it's hard to like pivot for, you know, once you've gone down that road, you can't just be like, oh, well, just tweak a couple things.
I remember this now. I was like, I don't think I have it in me. I can't like try and reinvent this mix now.
And I remember
think
you were
it
like,
would make more sense to have somebody else do it. Yeah.
Well, I think it was, you had framed it. I remember initially it was like, you fucking try it. Like, let's like, and it was like, why don't you like try and build it up in the computer? Because at the time, and I'll never forget this, when I started working for you 15 years ago, I had never worked on a console. So I remember coming to that studio and had worked as an engineer for a couple years, and I remember just being like, I got to be honest, like I don't know how to use this.
Right.
And you were like, it's easy. There's a button for everything. You know, and, you know, get into that workflow. And I remember the very sage advice that you gave me, which is like, learn how to do this on the computer, like as soon as you can. Because I know Matt Radosevich, who came before me, I think you had given him similar advice, or and he's an amazing mixer as well. And I remember just kind of leaning into that, and you know.
So what time frame was that? That was.
So I started working for you in 2010.
Yeah.
That's when I moved down.
So even then, which was, you know, early, at the very beginning of the Undertone stuff.
Yeah.
Even then, I knew, like.
I knew it was coming.
Yeah, consoles are on their way out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It just, you know, for whatever reason, the industry was moving past it. People were getting good results. You know, you had the Servans of the world were out there.
Doing great.
Eating fucking everybody's lunch. You
Yeah.
know? And yeah, so I built up a skill set, which was just kind of hobbled together from what I had learned from you in terms of analog land. I mean, you to your credit, you can mix in the box. Like you weren't like one of these guys like I can't do this in a computer. Like you can mix in the computer. Like
I certainly experimented with it at times and did my best to try and find my way through there. But there was always something about it that always just felt like I wasn't making a real record, and that's a holdover of me being emotionally attached to how I learned, you know.
Sure.
Yeah. It took a while for me to get over that.
Yeah. You did. You know, I mean, I think we all go in circles when it comes to this stuff. But there was an opportunity, and I remember, you know, I think I took it 80 or 90% of the way, and then you came in, and then we kind of tweaked it together, and that was a mix. I remember at the time that was a cool moment for me as your protege, being like, fucking cool, like you know.
And it was a
awesome.
great mix. You can all check it out. It's out in the world. It's a great fucking mix. And so now, fast forward, you know, whatever, more than a decade, and one of the things I'm really curious about, just having listened to a bunch of your stuff, and if you're not aware, Cian has worked a lot with the artist St. Vincent, and one of the things that I really, really love about her particular music making is how incredibly adventurous it is. Totally fearless, like no rules. And she puts together some of the most just unexpected collections of sounds that are like they have no sort of obvious relation to each other. And then you're expected to have to get it to all make sense. And I'm just wondering what that's like. Like, is it more liberating to have this just crazy sort of array of bizarre sounds that you have to work with, or is it more challenging? Or, I mean, what is that experience like?
I mean, all of the above.
Yeah.
I mean, I will say that working with St. Vincent with Annie is, I mean, I started as a fan of hers, and I remember there was a period when I was working with you, and her earlier records had come out, and you know, everybody has these kind of like sonic milestones when things come out, and you're just like, what's that? You know, like,
Yeah.
this is cool. This
Yeah,
is
her stuff has always been very ear-catching.
yeah,
It's just like, what
it's
is
always
going on
weird.
there? Yeah.
And so I was a fan, and I remember when I started working with her, and you know, I started just kind of helping her engineer, and then the relationship grew. And on this last record, you know, to answer your question, like we both had musical ADD. Like we both love so much different types of music for all different reasons, whether it's just the songwriting or the performances or the sonics. And when we were gearing up to make this record, it was kind of awesome because she had just embarked on building her own home studio. So I
Okay,
was
yeah.
basically shepherding that. And we were kind of building the studio to make the record.
Yeah. Oh, interesting.
So
yeah.
she was gone. She went super deep down the rabbit hole of modular synths and drum machines, and that was cool to me because like my experience as a studio engineer, like when someone brings a modular synth into the studio, it's just like we're getting nothing done today. So like bleeps and bloops are coming my way, and like we're not gonna use any of this. Like pretty much guarantee it. But it's just like a fucking waste of time. And so with her, when you actually have like a real musical mind and she's got, you know, the attention span to really go in and learn these like esoteric things that she would pick up. And I saw the benefit because what she would do is I would set her up and then I would leave.
Yeah.
And then she would go and she would just be up at all hours of the night, just piping stuff into the computer, just having fun, just being reckless. And I'd kind of showed her roughly, I'd set up her patch bay and I was like, look, with the console, you can do this, you can push this into that. And she fucking got the memo and she ran with it. It was amazing.
Yeah.
So I would get to come into like things being kind of more refined. And then I would, you know, help collaborate then in just terms of like making sense and getting it into a song. And you know, like you said, it's a lot of different types of sounds. So we'd have this like modular drum bed, but then we would start layering on organic instruments. There'd be acoustic guitars, there'd be real drums, there'd be horn sections, there'd be God knows what else. And the fun was like, how do you get everything to exist in that same world? And there's no real answer outside of just trying it. You know, like there were literally moments where we're like, fuck, it'd be really cool to have Dave Grohl play drums on this because like what else could we hear on it? And the next thing we know, like Dave Grohl's playing drums on it. And it was amazing. And like, you know, it was an incredible experience, but I think she gave me a long leash in terms of like, you know, she left me to do my thing in here. And so we had it set up where we had a Dropbox folder. We had our systems fully married plugins wise.
Yeah.
So like she could be working on at her space. I'd be working here. She could call me being like, this vocal sound, like I want it to sound like Cocteau Twins. And I'd be like, close your session. I'd pull up the session here. I would work something up because she would have had just like a little snippet of a verse.
Right.
I'd give her a bunch of effects, close it, save it. She would open it. She's recording vocals. She's like, this is great. I'm in the vibe now. Like, so
that's so
stuff
cool.
like that was very like fun and collaborative. And then when it came to mixing, that's when I kind of, I mean, we probably spent a year mixing the last record.
Oh, wow.
Just on and off. Obviously, we're doing other things, but that's a real luxury. I mean, some people would be like, oh my God, a year. But to me, it's like, I love the songs. I want them to sound great. And like, we're just going to kind of keep chipping away at them until
I think it's amazing to be able to live inside something for that period of time. You should go to Cian's website, check out the first song that he has. It's the song Broken Man. And it's like, you pull up a song, you know, a recording like that, there's no reference for that. You know, so like, I like to have a reference that I listen to sort of keep me on track when I'm mixing something and I don't stray off in some weird way and screw up my mix and get lost in it. There is no reference for that. There's nothing that sounds anything like that. There's nothing that has a collection of sounds like that. And so you're really, there's no rules, you know? Yeah. So it's a really cool environment to work in. So
thank you. Yeah, I mean that's the fun of it. And I think one of the benefits, I will say, you know, I've essentially only been mixing for 5 or 6 years now.
Yeah.
And pros and cons to that as an engineer. I think, you know, we all have like, we like to record things and play things, whatever. But because Annie was kind of my only like recording production client, she got all of that brain.
Right.
So like I'd be driving around thinking like, oh, I'd love to have like this juxtaposition. I'd love to have drums sound like this, or like a guitar sound like this, but married with an organic sound. Like you're just thinking about these things, and then you just pocket them, you know. And then there's just opportunities on records where I'm just like, I'm gonna chase this.
Yeah.
And there was like those big drum moments. There's these really big kind of aggressive guitar swells. Like I've always just wanted to do something where it's like, I want this to take your fucking head off.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, and it was a fun process down the chain because we had a great mastering engineer, Rory, and he got the memo too. And I was very, you know, like this needs to live like this. Like we can't temper these dynamics. Like it needs to. And he was super on board. And it's cool when everything just like comes to the end of the line, and it's like, that's what I thought about 2 years ago.
Yeah,
you know?
that is cool. So the other thing that I noticed just listening to recent round of stuff is I think you've really mastered the art of the like super in your face, super dry, super compressed vocal. It's fucking incredible. Like,
Thank you.
man, you know, because conceptually it's an easy thing to do. Don't put any reverb on, add a lot of compression, turn it up, you should be done. But it doesn't always work out that way.
Yeah.
And it has to be done with a particular, you know, care and attention to detail. So you really want to have it that close to your face. And, you know, what you've been capturing on this recent stuff, whether it's St. Vincent or Lana Del Rey or some of these other recent projects, man, the vocal is so cool. I've just, you know,
cool.
has this just incredibly unrelenting dynamic. Like it is so pushed into your face, and it just feels great. Like just, yeah, I don't know, the balance of it and the sibilance and everything has to be right or it doesn't work.
Yeah, I mean, it is like a lot of it is that, you know, that's kind of my first.
So you're using a lot of this.
Yeah, I mean, the BG2 that's usually the first at bat. Like when I'm going for that, it's some combination of that.
I'm happy to hear that it's, well, I don't know, I shouldn't really, you know, try and bias it one way or the other, but it's cool that it's an analog box.
It's an analog box. It's, you know, it's basically that going into one of these.
Okay, so an MPEQ1.
An MPEQ, and sometimes it's not even getting used, but it's just to be able to audition EQ moves, usually like adding high end. And then I got into using this fucking hardware de-esser.
The old.
There's just something about it where it feels like because when you're compressing that much, sibilance is just an issue.
Right.
Especially if, you know, and usually when I'm recording a vocal too, I'm giving it a good kick in the pants on the way in as well.
Yeah.
But I feel like there's something about using this before I go back into the computer that just buys me, you know, some room. Obviously, I'm still going to go through and DS, but in order to get that sound, there's no shortcut. It's a lot of like RXing, clip gaining, you know, going through. Once I get the print and I've got it kind of sitting where I want, and then it's like the grueling detail work of going through, you know, sometimes transient by transient, just, you know, just notching stuff out. And adjusting stuff.
To smooth out some of the beginning, like when the compression first kicks in and you get a big spike. And
I really like the sound. Like this does that, and it has that spike, but a lot of times it's just too much. And now with the computer, with, you know, like the clip gain lane, you can get so fast with that. Yeah. And you just, you know, it just takes 20 minutes. You go through and then it's done.
And then it's perfect.
And then it sounds great, and it's super loud. And I like to start, you know, vocals don't always end up that way, but I like to kind of have that option. Yeah. And then it's very easy to kind of dress it up in reverb and, you know, whatever stuff after you've done that. But then you've got this great canvas to do that with, you know.
Yeah. That's cool. I'm going to say it again. Happy to hear there's some analog stuff still involved in that process. Because it really does feel very musical.
Oh, cool, thank you.
The last thing I wanted to ask about is, because I think this, for a lot of people, ends up being what they're most interested in, or could be the most helpful and the most important information to get. And I know this is potentially a difficult thing to try and pin down an answer, but, you know, we met each other, you joining my studio, Barefoot Recording, as an assistant, and worked there for a number of years, almost 10 years or something like that.
About.
And then at that point, when I was sort of transitioning into doing other things, and you were already had cultivated a great collection of mixing skills, engineering skills, but then something very important happened between being an assistant at Barefoot Recording and winning 2 Grammys with an amazing, innovative artist like St. Vincent. And those transitions are the things that people really want to know about. Like, that's the most important stuff. Like, how do you get from being an assistant in a studio to making Grammy award-winning records with amazing artists? Like, is there anything along the way that you can recall that was like a pivotal moment, like an important realization, an important, milestone, or a door that opened, or a thing that happened along the way that really sort of helped make that transition happen?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I have to preface it by saying that, like, there's no world where I'm at without you and me coming to work for you. Like, that was such a level up from where I was coming from. When I think about my journey, working in Santa Cruz, working on very, very independent, small scale projects, to kind of coming into your world, which was just the opposite end of that spectrum, which is like major label budgets, big bands, like, incredible process, your amazing brain and skill set. And for me to be able to kind of walk into that, and kind of that was the first page in the textbook for me in Los Angeles.
Yeah, so maybe there's a bunch of information you're able to absorb through that experience, but then you take that information, and since then, we're not working in the studio anymore, and that's when you went and are doing all this incredible stuff. So
that was a big part of it, was coming up under your shadow and trying to learn everything, trying to learn your process, right? Mm-hmm. And me starting to realize within that process that, like, I don't know if this is my process. Like, there's a certain point where the roads start to diverge, right?
Sure.
And I start to kind of like have my own stuff. And I remember there was a point where, and it really coincided with leaving the building. And I remember that was a big crossroads in my life, because I was getting married. I was talking about starting a family. I was thinking about changing careers, because I was like I'm making a living doing this, but like it's still a bit of a grind, and I don't know like if I'm cut out for this, And the first big gig that I had come out of it was this artist, Slater Kinney, and I remember that just pulled me out of that funk. And it was the first record that I basically did outside of Your Shadow, outside of Barefoot. And it was the first time that I really was convinced that, they actually just want to work with me. Yeah. And they want to do, like, they trust me. They don't care about you or Barefoot or plaques on the wall. They're like, no, you're the dude, like, fucking make this record. Yeah. And I remember that being, one, terrifying, but also just really liberating, because then I'm not trying to do something that's not in my bones. I'm just doing what I want to hear. Yeah. And once you kind of free yourself from trying to chase sounding like someone else or do something that someone else is doing, when you just like, I just want to do what I like and what's in my head, like, things just start to happen. Yeah. Because then you're not reading a textbook anymore. It's a fiction novel. You're having fun. You're enjoying it. It's probably the biggest jump.
Yeah, that's really cool to hear. And I think something that I'd always identified as being sort of the plus and minus of doing either an internship or being an assistant or working in someone else's world, you get the benefit of having all of that knowledge available to you, but you're not free to sort of carve out your own way of doing things. Yeah. And obviously that process started for you after you left Barefoot, you know, and could have been the most important and beneficial step, in your path to Grammydom. You know,
I mean, I still stole tons of your ideas. Don't worry.
They're here for everybody. Yeah. And So that's one of the trade-offs of taking that path. And I don't know if you remember this, but very, very early on, I think we went to Roscoe's Chicken and Waffles.
Yes, I do remember this. Yes, it was we'd finished the first record that I assisted you on.
Yeah.
And we were getting a mastered at Bernie Grunman's.
We
and
were.
That was
sort of the
tradition.
ritual. Yeah.
And here we are, like out in the real. I think it's the first time I ever hung out with you outside of the studio, like a year later.
Yeah. It's like a Bigfoot sighting. Yeah. You being out of that studio.
Yeah.
And we sat down, and I remember asking you, like, so what do you want to do? What do you really want to do? And you said you wanted to make records, and I don't remember if it went exactly like that, but I basically told you, like, you're too smart for that.
Yeah, I do remember this.
Yeah, like,
I was like, am I getting fired? Like, what's happening?
But I really did feel that at the time. You're profoundly capable human being. You're just great at everything you do, whether it's computers or music. You play drums, you mix, you built the studio, like you're just one of those people. You're good at anything you want to do.
Thank you.
And there are just so many things that you could have done that I think are potentially less risky, have a more, I feel like this is the same shit I heard from my dad, And I basically told you the same thing. It's like you're too smart. Like you should do something that
I remember that conversation. I remember it was just like, this is changing. This process is changing. I remember I think at the time you were also kind of lamenting the record making world around you was changing as well. The money wasn't the same, and
the writing was on the wall at that point. The trajectory of streaming and downloading and all the sort of digital sharing of files and all that stuff, like the effects were undeniable, and you could just see how it was going to change. And
it was a fair question.
It was, and even though I still feel good about challenging you with it, because I loved your response, and what your answer was, but I really love doing this.
Yeah, I'd be doing this if it wasn't for the money anyway. Like, this is what I'm going to do.
And that's the right answer.
Yeah. That's a hard thing to convey to people. Yeah. And even in conversations with friends and my wife, I'm just like, this could all go away tomorrow.
Yeah.
And I could have some desk job or doing whatever the fuck. I would still be doing this.
Yes.
I would still have a studio, and I would still be making records. Like, that part of my life is never going away. And I think I'm just lucky to have had a couple lucky breaks paired with some good hard work.
And the skills to to be able to take advantage of those breaks.
It takes a long time to build up that skill set. And I remember you had these these drum recording techniques, or you just had so many tools in your toolkit from your years of making records. And I would stay up like late at night and lose sleep because I'm like, I'm never going to be able to make a record this way. Like, I'm never going to have the time to sit down and spend a week getting drum sounds. And it was just glorious record making. It's what you loved it.
Extremely
I loved it.
Indulgent record making.
Gluttonous record making. But, the thing that I was like, well, then I'm just going to take the condensed knowledge and just learn from that and try and make it work in the context of, at the time, making indie records where there is no money and there's no time, but like you could still have some of that.
Sure.
And I wouldn't necessarily call it a trade-off, but it was just a reframing of it. And as soon as I kind of started to spin it into like my own thing, everything just got easier.
Yeah.
And panic went away, and then I was just like, I'm just doing what I think is cool,
Yeah.
And that's when I think work really resonates with other people, because I think people sniff that out.
Yep. Yeah. If you really have your own compass that you follow, then there's something to rely on there. I think that's important. Well, I'm delighted to have watched you find your compass and what you've done with it, because it's been incredible. And I'm happy that we found each other along the way and got to enjoy working together for such a long time, and and now you're off doing incredible things as well. So
thank you. It means a lot, and thank you. Thank you for everything.
Okay. Well, thanks for having us in your super cool studio. This was great.
Anytime.
Yeah. All right.
Alrighty.
Bye.